Hello again, everybody. This is Dan Clouser, and welcome back to the Journey My Mother's Son podcast. Today I'm joined with fellow coach, father, teacher, husband, and host of the Living Numbers podcast, Tony Rambles. Tony, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you, Dan, for having me. I know when we did the episode for my podcast that just came out on Sunday, make sure you guys go check that out. We had a great time and we chopped it up. So I knew we would have to do it again.
Absolutely. Absolutely. As soon as I saw that you wanted to be a guest on some shows, I reached out immediately and was like, hey, we had so much fun. Let's do this thing again. So I always love being able to kind of turn the tables on other hosts and put them in the hot seat. But before we get started with the conversation, just tell my listeners a little bit about who is Tony Rambles.
Man, where do I start? The journey, to use the word that's in our title here, the journey has taken me so many places, but I think first and foremost, I'm a teacher wherever I go, and I love to connect with people. So, however I'm able to do that, then that's what I do. Wherever I am, I'm always trying to connect, trying to talk to people, trying to encourage, trying to get people to realize their potential. So I think that's kind of where the podcast was birthed. That's how I became a teacher. That's how I became a coach. And so yeah, I think that's who I am, kind of in a nutshell. I'm a teacher, I'm a connector.
Love it. Absolutely love it. So tell me a little bit about why you wanted to start podcasting in the first place.
So I feel like my gift from God, I think we talked on this a little bit last time, but my voice is my gift. Right. So that started with me teaching in the church and my way to again teach and connect with people. That took me overseas to teach English in China, where I was able to start my teaching journey as far as in the classroom, and which obviously brought me back here. And I teach high school level kids and I teach speech class. So everywhere I go, I'm kind of using this voice to bring people together, to train people up. And I thought that, okay, if I could make a larger impact, how would I do that? And that's when I came to podcasting. And I'm sure you see this all the time. They always said you got to have a niche. You got to have a niche. What is your niche? What is your little corner of the world? And for me, I always thought, well, man, I like a lot of stuff. I'm a big proponent of marriage. So I wanted to do it with my wife. I wanted to start a podcast with my wife. That did not happen because she is more of a behind the camera person. She'll indulge me at times and come on to my podcast. And we've done, I want to say maybe 3 or 4 episodes. So she's not averse to coming on, but it's not her baby. It was my baby. So I'm like, okay, well, I guess maybe I could find a co-host. And like I know, if it's not their idea, if it's not their baby, again, to keep the analogy, they're not going to do everything it takes to start the podcast, to run the podcast, to keep the podcast going. So eventually I came to the realization that this was given to me. So I will have to do it not necessarily on my own, but it's going to be my show. It's not going to be anybody else's show. I won't be sharing it. So I also thought, well, I love sports, but do I want to talk sports all the time? No, I have so many other interests. So I thought, okay, maybe I could just interview people. I could have different people on, kind of like some of the shows that I like to watch, Undisputed and, First Take, where they have different people on, Colin. So you have a host, but then they have different people on to talk about different stuff. So that's the direction I started going in. And, first it starts with friends and family, whoever's arm you can twist to get on the show. Anybody that I thought was kind of interesting or gave an insight. So when the NIL stuff first dropped and college athletes were starting to get paid, a friend of mine that's also a coach that I taught with, he was a Division 1 athlete. So I said he would be the perfect person to have on to kind of talk about what it's like to be in this realm. So, I tried to find people that kind of fit what was going on. And then I just started finding amazing people. So I then started to tailor my show to who they are, their journey. And that's kind of brought us where we are today, where I'm finding these amazing people. And I'm like, man, I want to tell their story. And I want to do it my way. And I want to make them feel comfortable telling people their journey and kind of adding value to people. So that's brought us to where we are today.
Yeah, I love it. And so similar to, my view of podcasting as well. And I hate it when, people want to kind of put us in a box, because again, I was a
Man.
former coach, I was a baseball guy, softball guy, sports guy. But this podcast is about so much more than sports. And I've had, former Olympic athletes and former major league players on. I episode a little while ago that just came out was with one of the former Harlem Globetrotters, and but it's so much more than that. It's so much more than
Yes.
sports. It's just there's so many interesting people and people that we've met in our journey in the RV that they just have incredible stories to tell,
Yes.
and like I said, you and I connected first on your show, and immediately, you know, it was like, well, this is definitely a guy I want to have on my show, and a guy that I'm going to look up when the RV gets into the Houston area for sure. So
Yes,
tell me
sir.
a little bit about the title, the living numbers, and you kind of
Mm-hmm.
um, from when I was a guest on your show, you kind of incorporate like these like random numbers throughout the show as you're doing research on each of your guests. So tell me what the concept was behind that, and why you incorporate it the way you do into your show.
So it started again from me having a plethora of interests, but I had to think, okay, I don't want it to just sound random all the time. How can I tie these different interests together, right? How can I go from cooking to sports to marriage to maybe video games? Who knows, depending on who I have on. How can I transition from one place to the next? And I thought, well, numbers are in everything. You can't get away from numbers. No matter if you're talking about cooking, we could talk about numbers like measurements, how many cups, how many pounds, right? And then if we start talking about video games, I could start talking about dates and times games went out and connect them to memories. And now I have a story to tell. So I just use those numbers to then allow me to talk about anything because I can transition everything with numbers. I can always find a number no matter what, like dates, times, measurements, you name it, I could find a number for it. And then I can use that to then talk about whatever it is that I want to talk about. So when I had you on and we were talking about your mom and we talked about the 1967 Plymouth Valiant, right? That's an easy way to go, man, your mom had this great car that she used as a part of her story. Now tell me about your mom. Right now we can get into the details of the story. So that's where the numbers happen because again, I didn't want to be put in a box. So I had to find a way to break out of the box, and that was the numbers.
Yeah, I love it. It's very, very interesting, and a very clever way to again tie that story together. Because again, I remember in mine you talked about the acres of the complex that we used to run, and all that sort of stuff. So it was really a very, again, very clever, genius way to tie that story together. So I love that. Um, so you know your show is is very interesting. What what was it that you know a- as you kind of polished your craft as an
Mm-hmm.
interviewer, so to speak? Um, where was a point where you were like, this is really cool. Like I really enjoy these these interactions. I mean, like how far into your podcasting career, so to speak, was it like, yeah, this is for me. I can do this.
There are a couple of episodes that stand out to me for different reasons. So episode, man, I want to say it's like 26, I want to say, I had my uncle on, and he's kind of always been like the big shot of the family, right? He lives in the Northeast, right? Your neck of the woods. He stays in Hartford, Connecticut. We grew up there a little bit. We New Britain, New Haven, so we're kind of in that Connecticut area. Then he started to, I guess, climb the corporate ladder. He worked in New York City, which he still does, and he lives in Connecticut. So you know how that commute is. So I was able to have him on and hear stories that I had never heard before, right? And so we talked about kind of being men, right? Because I'm 33, 32, I think at the time, having this conversation is different than him talking to, a 12-year-old or a 16 or even a 20-year-old me, right? I've been married, I have my own home, I have a son that's 1 year old and running us up the wall, right? The perspective is different. And so we were able to connect on a different level. So that was really cool to have Uncle Tony on. He's like a senior marketing manager for Warner Media, I think it is. But to talk on a level as men, and for him to kind of indulge me, and I already know Uncle Tony is funny. That's the first Tony. I'm the second one. I came down the line, but that's one of the episodes. Episode 30, I think, is one of my best episodes, not just because of the person that I have on, but I think the way that I did the episode, I think it's really clever, right? I'm not gonna toot my own horn here, well, just a little bit. So episode 30, I wanted to do something, when you get those round numbers, you kind of got to try to do something different, out of the box, special, if you will. And I had my pastor on, who's a really good friend of mine. I've been with him for probably, I think, almost 10 years, if not 10 years now, pretty close. I think a little bit before me and my wife got married. So me and him, we're tight. So you just get us in the room, we can go for hours. So the premise of episode 30 was 30 little things I'm thankful for. So it's not family, it's not friends, it's not that stuff. It's when you're on your way to work and you get all green lights. You're like, yes, that's a W. When you make your coffee and you get the coffee ratio and the creamer ratio and sugar, like it's perfect, like it's exactly right. And you take a sip, man, that's a great cup of coffee, right? So these little things, right, that just kind of get us through our days, right? When you're playing music and it's on shuffle, and I have tons of playlists, but when the shuffle, every song that comes on, you're like, yes, that's a good one. Yes, that's a good one. That's perfect. So these little things that happen in life that just make our days better. We just talked about 30 of them. So I think that's one of the episodes where I'm like, man, this is pretty cool to have somebody that I'm great friends with to sit across from. And this guy, he believes in me, right? If I say, hey man, can we do an episode tomorrow? I think he would do everything he could to make it happen, if at all possible. And he's one of the reasons why I started podcasting as well. We could talk about that story, but one more episode is episode 42. Episode 42, I had Charlie Fatal on. This guy is a financial advisor in Canada. And episode 42 kind of started the mark where I started to have these accomplished professionals on. So it was him, and then I had a psychologist on, Dr. Gans. Then I had a scientist on, Dr. McCullough. And then I had Terry Tucker on, who had done a ton of stuff. And then I had like these doctors, these very accomplished people come into my little corner of the earth, and they say, I like what you're doing. I want to be a part of it. That just gave me like the confidence to continue, because, you're doing these episodes and you could kind of go, okay, does anybody like this? Is anybody watching this? Like, is it any good? I like it, but, and to have these accomplished people, Zakia Akarele, episode 49, she's got 2 masters from Columbia, and she's got a doctorate from Fordham, and she wants to be on my podcast. So episode 42 kind of gave me that boost, and I felt like I was gaining my respect in the podcast space for what I was doing. So those 3 episodes really, really helped me along to see that I was doing something great.
Yeah, that's cool. And again, very similar stories, what you and I have. I mean, because I've had a lot of my family members on, I've had grandkids on, I've had aunts and uncles on, I've had cousins on. Um, and again, I think it comes back to, enjoying being able to tell those stories. And I'm a firm
Yeah.
believer in the fact that everyone has a story to tell. And I think all those stories can be inspirational to someone. And I too had our old pastor on as well. He was one of my very first episodes. And we just talked about a new normal because he was in the process of retiring after, 50 years
Oh, that's
in
good.
the ministry. And at the same time, Sandy and I were just hadn't sold everything, but everything was on the market, and we were getting ready to launch this new journey ourselves. So that was a very cool episode for me. So it's funny as I listen to you talk, how I'm kind of like, yeah, okay, yeah, a lot of similar things going on. So you mentioned a little bit about your pastor kind of gave you a nudge and kind of pushed you into this podcasting space. Tell
Oh
tell me a
man.
little bit about that story.
Okay, so there's this training. He's all about entrepreneurship is one thing that he's really pushing for all of us, right? You got to have multiple streams of income. Once he figures out a stream, he's going to do everything he can to help other people do it. It's not like he figures stuff out and then keeps it to himself. I love that so much about him. Other people have started businesses in our church, in his family, in other people's families that he's just like, I'll train you up, right? Train them up, show them the way that they should go, right? So he's kind of like, we're kind of like his baby entrepreneur children, right? So he's training us all up, all to make us better. And he believes everybody should operate in their gift, whatever that is, whether it's teaching or singing. I mean, if you feel like if God gave you the gift to be the best break dancer in the world, you need to be break dancing, every day, find a way to take that break dancing and add value to the world and make some money off of it, right? We sometimes people think like because God gave us this gift, like we're not supposed to profit off of it. And I would say that that's completely wrong. I think it's all about the way that you go about it, right? If I'm selling my gift off and now I'm singing about these worldly things, then I think that's the wrong way to do it. Once God gives us something and we can use it to edify his kingdom, then now what he say, he'll open up the windows of heaven, right? He'll add it all to you. You won't have to want for anything. So I'm going all in the scripture now, but he we put us through this training called Unique, YOUNIQUE, I think it is. And it helps you to discover your gift, what your area of giftedness is. And so part of that for me was discovering, me teaching, which I pretty much already knew. I had been kind of doing this thing, but it gave me the nudge to really start to use my voice in a broader sense. And so from there, at the end of the 8 weeks, it challenges you. What is something that you're going to do for the next? I think it's the next 8 weeks. So I said, okay, for the next 8 weeks, I'm gonna put out 8 episodes, or I think it was 10 weeks, 10 episodes. After I went through that training, I was like, okay, like it's time to stop talking about it and like go. So from there, I mean, I started to buy mics. I started off in the closet, with the bedspreads up, to for sound. And I started off in in the doldrums like many people. But from there, I just, you start to hone your craft. But the unique training that my pastor, he doesn't force anybody to go through it, but he encourages everybody to do it because it's only going to help you be the best that you can be. So once I went through that, I was like, okay, podcast, I'm coming for you. It's happening. And from there, it's been full sales, full speed ahead.
I love it. Love it. And I agree with you. I think sometimes people do get caught up thinking, well, if I'm doing this for God, I shouldn't really be making a whole lot of money on it, that sort of thing. And that's really not the case whatsoever. I think if you're doing things for the right reason, that money is not the goal of why you're doing what you're doing. I think that is what completely changes the perspective. So if you're focusing on doing good work, focusing on doing things the right way for the right reasons, then everything else will follow behind it. So I think that's the
Yeah,
difference
man.
there for sure.
I
Um,
agree.
so you you know you're an interviewer, but now in this case you're the guest. So how does that feel when you have the tables turned, and why um, why do you want to get on other podcasts in addition to just hosting your own?
I'm a talker. I'm a connector. So for me, it is not uncomfortable at all to be on this side of the table. I enjoy it because at this point, it's just another way for me to connect with the host. For us, it's just another reason for us to have a conversation and chop it up again. Another way for us to do our thing and to help you. Shoot, if you came on my podcast and we had a great episode, I'm like, why wouldn't I want to do this again? So that's why I started. And also, I feel like as I connect with more hosts, then now I'll be able to connect to their audience, and hopefully, after seeing me on the Journey of My Mother Son podcast, these people will then go, man, I like that guy. He had a great smile, or he had great stories, or he knows what he's talking about, or this guy's full of crap. I need to go hear some more. So I can, whatever it may be, hopefully I can, bring people to my audience as well. Cause I do think I'm doing great work with the people I have on, and we add value, to people's lives. So I think it's fun. And guess what, Dan, after this is over, I don't have to do any editing. I don't have to do any of the administrative work. I just come
Yeah,
on, say my hellos, tell my stories, and I'm out of here.
yeah, I hear you. I hear you there. But that's a reason as well that I just absolutely love the podcasting community. And I talk about that on a lot of times when I'm a guest on a show, or even as a host, is that the podcast community, similar to the RV community, is such a very special and giving community. Like there's no competition.
Mm.
Like as far as I'm concerned, if every one of my listeners that listens to this podcast jumps on over to the living numbers and likes and subscribes your podcast, like that's cool, man. Like that is not what we're about. It's not about, oh, Tony's going to get more downloads than me, or Dan's going to get more downloads than Tony. Nobody cares about that. It's all about lifting each other up. And by lifting each other up, we're lifting ourselves up. And that's one of the things I truly, truly love about the podcast community. And like I said, very similar to the RV community that we're in as well. It's just such a giving and caring community, and just again, no competition whatsoever. There's enough room out there. There's enough people listening to podcasts that it's not going to hurt my show by people going on your show or one of my other guests' show and subscribing and
Mm-hmm.
listening and checking it out. So that's what I love about it so much, for sure. So let's shift gears a little bit. Um,
All
we're
right.
uh, we're both sports guys.
Yes, sir.
I'm a former coach, and you are a current coach and teacher, which are two very similar, professions. So,
Mm.
um, tell me what you know led you into the coaching world. Um, you coach. If I remember, you're coaching basketball and softball. Is that correct? From when I did your show.
Correct.
All right, perfect. So, what made you jump into that, and what do you enjoy about that world?
I'm a huge basketball fan. So I enjoy watching basketball. I honestly still enjoy playing more than I enjoy any other part of it, watching or coaching, because I still feel like I'm I'm pretty athletic still. I still got my faculties. I can still go. I'm not going to pick up the golf clubs until they make me. But I wanted to be able to pass knowledge on to whoever wants to listen, right? Whether it's boys or girls. And then it's just my heart to help, right? So if I see people playing and I see that they're missing something, if I can add to them and help them to kind of round out their game in whatever way, whether it's offensively or defensively or basketball IQ or training, tips, right? These people, I think these kids, they have a lot of like training kind of regiment, right? You got a lot of people who will work on like skills with them, but I feel like something that's lacking in sports as a whole is the IQ part of it, the brain, the thinking through it part, the situational part, because everybody just wants to get their trainer and run around some cones and dribble two balls at the same time. It's like, okay, that's great, but if you don't know how to move without the basketball, right, you're just kind of standing around getting in the way. So I wanted to be able to kind of give back in that way. I really enjoy teaching the game, not necessarily the drills part, but when it's 5-on-5 or 4-on-4, even 3-on-3, like the IQ part of the game is my favorite part to teach. The X's and O's, the little things that people say are little but make the biggest difference. So I don't believe in little things. Everything matters. Every piece matters. So that's why I got into basketball. Now, softball is a different story. So I grew up, my dad was a huge baseball player. It was really, really good. And I asked him, I said, how come you didn't really get us into baseball that much? We played a little bit as kids, but as we grew up, I feel like we really focused on football, which I don't coach, but it's probably my best sport is football. But high school football is a totally different battleground. I mean, we're talking 48-hour days, never mind 24. I would not coach football, even though I probably could coach it well. He was like, you guys just wanted to play football and y'all didn't want to get hit by the baseball. so, so we didn't play baseball. I know the game enough, right? I'm a fan of the game, Detroit Tigers, Miggy, watched those guys growing up, Verlander and Scherzer. We had them on the same staff and we lost them somehow, but that's another story for another day. But our softball coaches, who were just awesome. I knew them. I've been teaching with them for some time. And they were like, we kind of need one more person. And with girls sports, you got to have a woman, at least one. So before, when I was trying to coach with Coach Ming, that's his name, it was two guys already. So they couldn't get another guy in there as a coach. It was like, we kind of need a woman. And, I understand it. That's how things work. And the past couple of years, we had him, and then we had Coach Maddie, who graduated from Texas Southern. She was really good, and she's great with the kids and everything. So it kind of was the perfect storm where I had Coach Ming and Coach Maddie, who are great people first and foremost. And that makes a huge difference. So when the opportunity arises for me to be able to coach with them, I was like, okay, I'm a number 3. They're not expecting too much from me. I can go, I can just kind of be around. I can be a presence. I could be another adult in the room and do some of those administrative things, drive a bus, which I hate. My least favorite part about coaching is driving the bus, but it's part of the deal, right? But that's why I joined softball. It was because of the people. I knew some of the girls that played. They were awesome kids. So it was just the perfect storm of great coaches, great players, and I just wanted to be a part of it. And it's so funny because throughout the season, they were like, Coach Franklin, you're just here. Like you're not even just, you're along for the ride. And it was always like in a joking fashion, right? They wanted me around. They liked that I was around. But we all knew, like, I wasn't coaching anybody up, right? I was just there to encourage and help in any way I could. But man, those girls could run circles around me when talking softball or baseball. So sometimes, you just got to know your role and fit into it and not try to be bigger than you actually are. So that was my softball experience. Totally different than my basketball experience.
Yeah. I love that. Well, it's good to know that you're driving a bus because that'll get you trained for when you decide to buy the RV and travel around the country. It'll just
Man,
be second nature for you at that point.
you never know.
So let's talk a little teaching as well. Again,
Let's.
another incredible profession, a profession where you're, literally being able to, touch our future and influence our future. What made you get into that profession? Um, and you've been in it for a while and you're still pretty young at this point.
This is my sixth year teaching, and I really got into it to help those people who didn't know what after high school looked like. And it could happen to anybody. I was a really good student. I wasn't like straight A student, but I was like a 3.3 ish, right? So I was a good student. I didn't have any issues with schoolwork, but I didn't want to go to college. I wasn't ready at 18 years old to now go into more school. I was tired of it. I didn't have the worst experience, but I was definitely a little jaded. I'm like, I need to see what else there is to do. And college will be here if I'm ready to go back at some point. So there are so many kids that are on both ends of the spectrum where you might be a great student, not really sure what's next, what's out there, not really sure if you want to go to college or trade school or if you just want to work for a year, take some time off. And there are kids that they're terrible students, right? And they may think that they're not that smart and maybe they're just barely passing their classes. Well, that kid needs direction too, right? Because when you graduate high school, it's a different ball game. There is nobody that is saying like you have to be here at this time. You could just totally be a bum for the rest of your life if that's what you decide. And obviously there are repercussions for that, but both ends of the spectrum, and of course the people in the middle, everybody needs some help and some guidance on what's next. So that is the biggest reason that I got into teaching.
Yeah, and I think we spoke about that a little bit on your show, where I had mentioned about I'm a big fan of kids taking a gap year before jumping into
Mm-hmm.
college and jumping into all that debt because, like you said, at 18 years old, man, you just don't know what you want to do for the rest of your life. And like you said, college is always going to be there. It's not going anywhere. They're going to take your check, whether you're
Yep.
18 years old or 22 years old or 40 years old for that matter,
Yes,
Um,
sir.
so it's never too late to go back to school and figure out, once you've figured out what you want to do and do it. So
Yes.
I love that aspect because I think there's so many, teachers out there who are just encouraging that there's this one path and it's a
College,
4 year
college.
school, go, go, go. And I just can't agree with that. I think there's just so many other options out there, whether, like you said, whether it's a trade school, whether it's just working for a year. I'm encouraging my grandson who's going into his senior year right now to take a year off and just travel and meet people and, learn that way hands on. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and again, it's like we talked at the beginning of the show, we try to take these kids and stick them in a box. Say, look, this is the way you do it. This is the way you do it. This is the way you do it. And that's not the case. So it's so refreshing to hear
Yeah.
someone who's in that space who is out there having conversation with kids and say, look, this is an option, but this, and this are options as well. What do you want to do?
Yeah. And I think it's dependent on people's situation too. Like if you're in a family situation where things aren't the best and somebody's giving you an opportunity to go to college where it can get you in a new environment, I would encourage that person to go to college. Hey, get out of this environment. You may not feel like school is your favorite thing to do, but it's going to present you with an opportunity to now go to a new environment. Hopefully, school is paid for, at least partially, especially when you're getting money. If somebody is paying, now we got to have a totally different discussion, right? Because of how much college costs and is only going higher if somebody is now paying for you to go, I think the best option then is to go, but you got to make the most of it, right? You can't dilly dally, you can't screw around, because there are ways like where you can lose that scholarship, or you can get into a field that you're not really interested in. So there's a lot of conversations that you got to have, and you got to figure out the situation for each kid. And the only way that you do that is you got to connect. You got to connect. You got to have conversations. Sometimes those are uncomfortable conversations for you, for the kid, but they're necessary, and it's going to help them in the long run. Now, if you got a situation where your family is pretty straight, everything's set up, everything's steady, and you have an opportunity to take that time away from college because you don't want to go, or take that time away from school, I would encourage that person to do it, because like you said, and like we continue to say, they will take your money whenever you get ready to give it to them. There doesn't have to be any rush. It's when there's no scholarship on the table, I think the options are definitely more plenty. As backwards as that may sound, I think you're able to explore a little bit more. When people give money, though, hey, you gotta you gotta take that money.
Yeah, no, definitely agree with that. So we're just about out of time, Tony. Anything else that you want to talk about before we get to my final question?
I think, man, I asked you this question before, and you didn't have like a super solid answer. But I want to phrase it a different way. What's a place that you're looking forward to going in this upcoming year?
In the upcoming year?
Yeah, I guess like a year from now. So August 22 to August 23.
Um, well, if we're looking into June 24, Alaska is definitely on the radar at that point. So
Whoa, Alaska.
yeah, because we're working around grandkids' graduations, but um, over the next year, um, we're going to be a lot of back and forth into Pennsylvania, just because of different things that are going on with our family right now. So,
Yeah.
yeah, so we're heading to Wisconsin in about a month. We'll be back to Pennsylvania in October. We'll head south either to Florida or Texas, depending, for portions of the winter for sure, and then back to Pennsylvania. So the next year will definitely be a lot of back and forth into Pennsylvania again, just because of graduations and stuff going on with our parents and some stuff like that. So that's
Yeah.
definitely where we're looking at in the next year for sure.
It's kind of a gap year. You just dropped Alaska. You dropped the gauntlet and it was like, we got Alaska 2024, but
Yeah,
we're gonna be back and forth. Like, whoa, Alaska! I can't wait for that. That's gonna be awesome.
I'm
I
really
don't know if
looking
I was supposed
forward
to
to that.
ask you a question.
No, that's fine. I am looking forward to Alaska. Alaska in June, when you're walking around 11 o'clock at night and it's still daylight, like that I just can't fathom what that's like. Yeah, absolutely. So that's one of the reasons why I'm looking forward to that so much. My mom, that was one of her stops, obviously, and she just raved about how beautiful it was. So we're definitely looking forward to that. I think it's going to be an experience like none other, for sure. So, Tony, how do people find you? Where can they get the podcast? Where do they find you on the internet? All that fun stuff.
You can find me on YouTube, on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify. If you just search the Living Numbers Podcast, or Tony Rambles, either one, it'll typically pop up. Just look for a black guy with a hat on. It's probably going to be me. You can find me on TikTok, Instagram at the Living Numbers Podcast. You can find me, where else am I? TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook. Yeah, I have a Facebook page. I typically post a lot across those different areas. But wherever you are, just look for the Living Numbers Podcast. I'm probably going to be there. and I release episodes every week. I interview amazing people like Dan, and we just try to add value by talking about their experiences.
Absolutely. Love it. All right. So that brings us to my final question. So the subtitle of the podcast is Many Little People in Many Little Places, which is derived from the opening lyrics of a song by Michael Franti, Gloria, which go, when many little people in many little places do many little things and the whole world changes. So what's one of the little things that Tony does to make the world a little bit better place?
Man, I'm a teacher. I think though, there are a lot of teachers, right? I'm a teacher that goes to school with the attitude to connect to people, to try to bring a positive experience for everyone. So that's not just kids, that's other teachers too. Because a lot of times in education, it's always the kids, the kids, the kids. And I'm thinking if the adults aren't at the best that they can be, it's going to be a little bit hard for them to then bring their best to the kids. So I just try to go into every situation with a positive attitude and connect with people and just try to leave them with a positive experience of Tony.
Love it. Absolutely love it. Tony, loved having you on the show. And for folks out there listening, be sure to check out my other podcasts and blogs at journeymymotherson.com or danclouser.com. While you're there, hit the book link, pick up a copy of my most recent book, The Journey of My Mother's Son, Volume 1. Tony, thanks again for being on the show. Really enjoyed it and look forward to when we can connect in person.
Thanks for having me, Dan. It was a blast, as I expected.
You bet.